Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is going to be a video that is about the need to preserve Sahaj Marg literature and videos and audio cassettes, and particularly those done by Master Chariji Parthasarthi Rajagopalachari. It's something that I've been aware of for a while, and I haven't made a specific video. I've mentioned it in some of my other stuff, some of my other Journey series videos and some other videos, but I want to have a title out there that people can access and find who have Chariji literature, have Chariji videos, DVDs and CDs and audio cassettes or whatever it might be, or any kind of older Babaji books and some of these things that will be lost if there isn't some sort of effort to preserve them. So the first piece of this is there's a lot of things at play here that are working towards erasing Chariji's literature, Chariji's epic amount of work that he produced, content. Chariji content was a better way of saying it, from the face of the earth. And so the first thing is Daji and the Heartfulness organization, which has shown no effort or proclivity to republish any of Chariji's works. Chariji's books are, for the most part, out of print. Many of them are unavailable. I mean, it's unthinkable. Back when Chariji, 2014, any time before that, to think that Chariji's works and Chariji's, messages and his talks and all these things that he did, his books, would somehow disappear completely. That Chariji would be erased from the Sahaj Marg system. Like, he was such a big part of it. There's so many photos of him, when he was master of the system. And he did so much work. Like, his work was his thing, right? Being a worker for God was his thing. And he produced so much content. He traveled so much, gave so many talks, and wrote books and did all these things. And so we all just assumed that his successor, his disciple, would have benefited from the work the way we all did. Chariji's books and his talks and things changed my life. It changed me as a person, and so many of you who knew Chariji and benefited from his teachings and his explanation of Babaji's system, his Sahaj Marg method, and all the things that Babaji trained him. Babaji would bring Chariji around to explain Babaji, and explain Babaji's works. He was his chosen person, just like he was the face of the mission even when Babaji was alive, because Babaji would give very simple answers, and Chariji could, Babaji would say a sentence, and Chariji could give a 45-minute talk about that sentence. And so he had all these, the he, the hook, and I, all these things that are out there, these Hubble Bubble, videos and things. And so he was just a gifted speaker and explainer of spiritual principles. And, we all who participated in the Sahaj Marg system benefited from his talks and books. We all have his, things that have affected us, specific teachings, specific, whatever it might be. You can see here I have the Chennai flood. So I was in India when the flood happened in Chennai. And I'm showing you little clips of the flood, but what I really want to show you is after the flood was over, I walked up. There was a long ramp that Chariji's, they used to bring him up in a golf cart when he had trouble walking. And it went to the front of the ashram where he could come in through the side entrance, and the side, front entrance, and then be right close to the stage so he wouldn't have to do much walking. And it also was the path to the master's cottage, to Chariji's cottage. In the back of the ashram, there's a lot of mango trees there. And it was like a long ramp for people who are in wheelchairs or whatever it might be. And, many of us walked this path daily when we were in the ashram. And I was walking into the ashram and I saw that there are all these books. So I went back and got my video camera. And here it is, all these books that are there. And there's probably millions of dollars of inventory. Thousands of books here. and they're just all there. And I was kind of stunned, like this is after the flood. So at my flat across the street, which was a little bit on a higher area, it was a little bit, in terms of elevated. The ashram was at a lower point. We got about 3.5 feet of water, and it lasted about a day, and then it disappeared. And we were able to, the streets still were running in terms of canals, and it was, something where, it was the flood dissipated in a couple of days, and then streets were dry. And I went to the ashram and I saw the books, and I was stunned. I saw the debris and the where the ashram was, and the whole thing was just kind of almost like I was like almost in a state of shock because of the loss of all these wonderful books. Right? It had been a year since Chariji had passed away, and it was. I mean, there was a new thing coming called Heartfulness that Daji was already in the works for, and I didn't know what this would mean. I didn't have any, I just thought they would have to reprint these books. I didn't think there would be any, that Chariji's books would always be available. I didn't think that Kamlesh had some issue with him, which we'll get into in a bit. Like Kamlesh hates him or something. That Kamlesh does not like his literature, doesn't value his literature, and that he would let Chariji's memory be wiped away from the mission. And you got to understand this, that the people who knew Babaji, there's nobody who knew Lalaji anymore. There's only a few elderly people now that knew Babaji. There's who met Babaji, went to Babaji's house, interact with Babaji, and most of those people were younger. Babaji wasn't their real, maybe they liked Babaji, and but they were just kind of young, and they were early on in their abhyas, and they had a little bit of time with Babaji, but mostly their time is with Chariji. They remember Chariji as their master. Chariji was their big, he was the one that was there for the majority of their life. And those who stayed are still, most of the people are Chariji people. A few Babaji people around that, didn't totally accept Chariji and things like this. But Babaji, in the next 10 years or 15 years, all the people who have met Babaji will be gone. All the people who had personal interaction with him. 20 years, I don't know. Whatever it is, right? But it isn't that long of a time. And then in another so many years after that, all the people who knew Chariji will be gone. 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is. I mean, maybe even sooner. There's this idea that you die, and then all the people, the youngest person, the person who's the last person who knew you dies. And then, you're like nobody remembers you that lives on planet Earth, right? And if there isn't some effort to have some idea of who Chariji was, Daji never talks about him, and we'll get more into that in a moment. And so, at first I thought this was just, what happened, because the ashram was lower point than where I was. Some people said it was there were parts that were under 12 feet of water. I heard one person say that there was places that were about 20 feet of water. And where the ashram books were, they were up on the second floor. Most of them were stored in a place because it had flooded there twice before. The ashram was in a floodplain, and there was bad floods twice before at Chennai Ashram, the Manapakam Ashram, Babaji Memorial Ashram. And so there was floods. They knew that this could happen. And so everything of value, including these books and the inventory, was placed on, there was various buildings that had, they talk about floors differently in India, like whatever it is. But, they put them on the third floor, the second floor, third floor, whatever. They would be above the floodplain, right? And so, I just thought, well, the water must have reached the area that they were stored. But later on, I was told by people who are not fans of Daji. There's a guy called the Daji Truther, and he just talked to a variety of people. And he told me that the books were moved down to a lower floor right before the flood. And I should say this. My kids and I went to the movies, so we'd been in Chennai for basically like 3 years, on and off before we left. We did leave to get, visas renewed and came back. And we would go to the movies, like the mall, and like kind of just being back in America. The mall was kind of, a little bit of piece of America, like kind of an American mall in India, and we'd watch, American movies, and it had been raining epically. Like this was biblical, like rains. Like it rained for 3 months straight, and there was a dam that they eventually opened the floodgates because they worried the dam was going to be compromised, and they did it without any warning in the early morning hours. And I don't know if anybody at the ashram had any knowledge of this, because there's people in the government, high-ranking people in the government that did Sahaj Marg. Like I don't know if there was any pre-warning, but a week before the flood, my family and I went to a movie, and then we had to stop because there was water running down this road. Like it was a foot and a half of water running down this road like it was a river. And we waited. The movie got out around, maybe we went to the movies at 7 something. I don't know. Maybe we left at 7:30 from the mall. And we didn't get home till 2 in the morning. And I said to my kids, all right, we got to go to the store tomorrow, buy water, buy everything that we can, because there could be something like a bad thing happening because of the floods. Like we all knew it was, this was the worst rains they had in years. So everybody who had been through the floods before at the ashram, all the administration, all the people, and certainly Daji and all these other people, Kamlesh, they would be aware that the flood could happen because they had flooded before. And so their books should have been at the highest level of the ashram, right? They should have been, like there's places that didn't flood. There's floors upon floors of, there's all these administration buildings and things. And so these books all could have been placed there. But they weren't. In fact, I was told by this guy they were moved to the basement, a lower level, right before the flood. And so I don't have any, this other than somebody telling me this. But based on what I was seeing in terms of the books, that makes sense. Because it seemed like they wiped out all their inventory. Like there wasn't any books left. On top of it, this guy told me that he talked to 2 ashram managers who were told to destroy all Chariji's books after the flood happened. Like this is, by Daji. Daji called them and said, destroy the books. And if they didn't, he would replace them. And again, I don't have any proof of this. This is just something I was told that happened. And I believe it because since that time, okay, so there's things people say to you and you don't know directly. Conversations people had that you don't have access to. There's no video or audio recording of Daji saying this. So, I cover things like this all the time. That somebody says something, and it's speculative, right? It's somebody else's word, somebody else's story. And somebody, a person who's a third party who wasn't there, talked to somebody. He talked to 2 ashram managers who both said that this happened, right? And, whether the guy who tells me this, tell me this has credibility, that's, somebody I barely know, right? And then, then him talking to other 2 people I don't know. So, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I have no proof and don't need any proof. So where does the proof come in? Like, how do you know that these allegations have some merit? When people talk about things that happen without, you seeing any evidence of it. There's something I deal with all the time. How do I know that something has merit? Well, certainly internally, like in terms of your heart, in terms of your connection to the inner master and your connection to the etheric world. I mean, Babaji didn't need proof. Like Babaji would just go astrology. What is this? Like there's times people were asking him about Jesus. And he said, oh, no, let me go ask him, right? These European people, I think they were from Denmark, asked him about Jesus. And Babaji just went in intercommune with them, right? So there was no need for video evidence. He just talked to the source. And Jesus told him what was up, right? Jesus told him, gave him an answer about it. So what has happened since then? Well, there's been no republishing of Chariji's books, and none in terms of his DVDs. There's been things that were on the Sahaj Marg website, audio talks of Chariji, that have disappeared. That used to go to the Sahaj Marg website, and you go to Chariji's talks, and pretty much all of them have disappeared. You can't find them. There isn't any video evidence. There's a video on Vimeo of Chariji nominating Daji, which should be an epic event, right? That should be celebrated. But that video of Chariji saying that Kamlesh was going to be his successor doesn't exist on any official website. It's not on the Heartfulness YouTube channel. So even that event of Chariji, of Daji bowing down and Kamlesh getting on his knees and prostrating for Chariji is gone. And Chariji saying, you're going to be my successor. And so that only exists on Vimeo. And so you can't really find any of Chariji's works unless there's a few books like Fruit of the Tree and a few of these books that now are on the Heartfulness Life. They got rid of the Sahaj Marg channel bookstore, and Chariji stuff had been more or less erased. When my family went to the ashram in 2020 for the Lalaji Memorial Gathering, that was the inauguration of the Kana ashram. When we went to the bookstore, there was very little on Chariji. There's My Master, which is, something that's been reprinted, right? My Master is the one Chariji work that is going to survive the test of time, the one Chariji thing. But other than that, there's pretty much nothing, right? There's nothing of Chariji anymore. And again, look at all the videos that he put out and things like that, the Hubble Bubble ones and all these things that he had. And, the preceptor books, the training of preceptors, all these things that were epic, and, they were really helpful. I mean, there's things that helped us with knowledge. There's things that helped us on a spiritual level, things that touched our hearts. But Chariji's work was something that everybody thought would just always be there. It was just so much a part of the mission, all the explanations, and he was good at it. He was a gifted speaker. He was certainly much better than any other of the three masters. His ability to go up and give talks. I mean, Babaji specifically trained him for that. That was something that Babaji wanted him to do, and he traveled all around, 200 days a year. I mean, remember his epic travel schedule, and he'd always give talks, and he would always, give these profound messages, and there were, things that maybe some of them were, meant for a certain period of time in history, but there are a lot of what Chariji did, Role of the Master in Human Evolution, some of these books that were, extraordinary, and they were timeless, right, in terms of their the need of the Abhyasis to know the knowledge that was available in these books, right, and just the historic record of it all. Like somebody who becomes a Sahaj Marg nerd reads everything. Like I had my period, my first 2 years of the mission, where I read every book that was available, and of course the Whispers of Brighter World came out later. I read all these things that I read. And watched every video. I watched everything that was available. Like, you want to know everything about Sahaj Marg. The people who, this is their thing. And, people who experienced this, every little bit of it, every detail was interesting, right? And so you didn't, it was unthinkable that a master would erase the previous master's literature. But Daji has done that. He doesn't talk about Chariji. He doesn't talk about, which is my favorite Chariji book. He'd probably say My Master because it's about Babaji and, whatever. But he doesn't have any, there's no talks of him talking about Chariji's teachings. There's no talks of him talking about Chariji's books or literature. In fact, there was I remember some talk where Chariji said to him that he was too focused on Babaji's works. Like he was reading Babaji but wasn't reading Chariji, and Chariji was the living master, right? And so, he didn't have any, there wasn't anything to do with Chariji, in terms of his being a fan. It's clear that Daji was not a fan of Chariji's works and Chariji's decision-making. And when he's talked about Chariji, it's been in a disparaging way. He's hinted in various talks, including one on Chariji's birthday, where he talked about how Chariji got a message from Babaji that Babaji said he was going to give him one last test. He got the message on Daji's birthday, and Daji went in to see him, and Chariji slammed the message down and said, I don't like this message, and was complaining, and Daji, his disciple, was trying to advise him and saying, no, this is a good thing. And it didn't happen. It's just one of many of Kamlesh's lies. I mean, at least the message doesn't exist in the archives. There's no message where Babaji is saying, that this, Daji said it happened on his birthday, either 2010 or 2011. I looked at 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012, and I looked for any of the the archival messages, and there's not one message. There's one message in 2010 that doesn't say, Bobby does not say, you have one last test. There's one message that it sounds like the message that Chariji got on Daji's birthday, but Daji just embellished or flat out lied about it because he just does that thing. There was a talk that I did not hear, but one of the people who listens to my videos has been doing Sahaj Marg now for a number of years, and the guy called the Daji Truther both heard this video. It's since been erased, where Kamlesh says that Chariji didn't make it into the brighter world. That Chariji didn't make it into the brighter world. He's hinted and said things in the past. He said that, when he was doing Chariji's memorial, these are videos that are still available to people to see. This one is about, it's called something like Life of a Karma Yoga. It's available on the Sahaj Marg channel. It's where Kamlesh goes to Chariji's, goes to Manapakam, and he announces Chariji's final resting place will be, he's going to build a little bungalow, little shrine for Chariji in an obscure corner of Manapakam Ashram, which I have heard that he has been strangling for resources, that he won't allow them to serve food. And, again, these are just things people are telling me. But if you're there, you know whether this is true. If you're in Chennai or something, or you visited there, you'll know this, maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't, maybe you've seen it, I don't know. These are just information I have, but I believe it because the guy hates Chariji. Like he's he clearly is not a fan of Chariji's and wants to erase him. And so at that, he gave a talk where he, explained that Chariji was always complaining and Chariji was always, depressed. And so all he has is bad memories. That's why he doesn't talk about Chariji. So many people had noticed that he didn't talk about Chariji the way Chariji talked about Babaji, and Babaji talked about Lalaji. When Daji talks about his master, he talks about Babaji. He clearly thinks that Babaji was his master. Of course, he told a variety of Danish people. I talk to these various Danes who all said that Daji told a story where he went, when he was a young man, to assassinate Chariji. He had a gun, and he and several other disgruntled punky Abhyasis went to Shah Jahanpur, where Chariji was staying, and they were going to shoot him. And somehow they couldn't find the ashram, even though there's only 4 roads in the town. Like it's a small town, and they kept on. They had been there so many times before, and they were in some sort of cosmic vortex where they couldn't find the ashram, and he realized finally that what they were doing was wrong, and he got out of the car. But he's just never been a fan of Chariji. No matter what he said and whatever he pretended when Chariji was alive, that he wasn't a fan of Chariji's works, and he has said things that are disparaging to him. He also said that Chariji, that Babaji prepared Kamlesh to be master behind Chariji's back and without his knowledge. That Babaji was working on Kamlesh, even though Chariji was the master. But later on in another talk the same year, he said, "Why are you guys focused on the older masters? Only the living master can do anything." So he contradicted himself, which he does quite often. And so, lots of people have wondered why Kamlesh has disrespected Chariji in this way. And if Chariji did have some kind of a fall, a spiritual fall, and he wasn't what we thought he was, well, that means a master could fall. That means that they're all potentially fallen, and if Chariji fell, then Daji has fallen. Chariji is certainly much better than Daji, so there's that. Okay, so getting back to the point, let me say there's just one more thing I want to show you here. So there's one more piece to this, and then I want to talk about the preservation of the literature. This is a video called Unity, Gratefullness, Ratha, Sant, I can't even pronounce this, Tuktaji, Maharaj, Santha, at this place here. This is an ashram that exists about 6 or so hours from the Kana ashram. And it's where there are these people from Telugu. There's Telangani people there. Now, Daji doesn't have a group. Like, one of Daji's struggles is the region that he's from, and many of you probably know this more than me, people come from an Indian background. Daji he's a Gujarati. And there isn't a lot of spiritual people. There's no gurus from that area. They're known for business. In fact, there's a talk out there where Daji's there, and Chariji's blasting these people for being too business oriented, and they got to focus more on their spiritual life. Like he goes up to someplace in Gujarati where he is talking to these people there about, focusing more on being spiritual and less on their business, right? And so the ashram where the Kana ashram is in Telugu. It's in the Telangana region where the people speak Telugu. And there's a lot of prejudice and caste prejudice in India and things that, it's hard for the rest of us to understand. But Chariji had a following of Brahmins who are, have a proclivity towards spiritual life. It's a part of their culture. So that's why Chariji had such a huge following, and he was able to bring South India into the fold. And why the South Indians were never going to accept this guy, because he was not in their caste. And there's a lot of people who are, prejudiced, and they shouldn't be, but, they are. And so the people in, especially, Chariji was just better than Daji. He was a better speaker, a better writer. And he was just better. Like he had more of a presence. Daji makes a lot of stupid errors. He makes a lot of mistakes. He gets caught lying a lot. He's a little bit goofy, and he just says stupid stuff all the time. Where Chariji just was masterly. And, I talked to my older brother who said, we were talking about this years ago, Peter and I, and he indicated that he thought that that Chariji was such a hard act to follow. Maybe that's why they were trying to erase, Chariji. He wasn't talking about Chariji. So then I talked to a senior preceptor who, maybe a couple years later, and he said that, he had talked to other people, other senior people in the mission, and they were all saying the same thing. They were saying that Chariji was so great, like he was such a perfect example of what the Sahaj Marg system could do on all levels, spiritually, materially. He was just the epitome of mastery. That they had to minimize him because now the living master couldn't measure up. I mean, this was like the ridiculous argument people were making for Daji dissing Chariji, because you're not supposed to be great. Like, you're supposed to talk about how great your master was, right? Like, we've all experienced this. Like, I know what I am without Sahaj Marg. I'm not, I'm an under-functioning, underachieving, I'm contributing, non-contributing person to society. What I've become, whatever I've become since then is better. The Sahaj Marg system has made me better. Whatever I am now is better than what I was without it. Without Sahaj Marg in my life, without the master, without the energy, the transmission and things, I was barely functioning. I was not a functioning adult human being, right? And so whatever I am now, people say, people can go criticize me or this or that, right? Find shortcomings, but I know that the Sahaj Marg system has made me better. And whatever I include, whenever I'm in that meditative state and I am communing and, being a part of the, remembering the master of the Sahaj Marg system, the inner master, I perform better. We all know this. All of us who've done the system know this, right? And so you don't make yourself, you're not trying to compete with the previous master. You're supposed to celebrate the previous master. Like, that's Sahaj Marg 101. Chariji said he never thought of himself as the master. Like, Chariji was clear that what made him great was that Babaji blessed him with all the spiritual work and all his presence and the, transmission, all the things that we were blessed with, right? And so somehow everybody's forgotten about that and think that it's appropriate for Daji to erase his former master from the mission. It's silly. It's a silly excuse. That's the opposite of the effective approach. I was talking to my wife about this, who's new to the system, and she said, if you had a beloved boss who was, beloved in the company, and then you were appointed to take over, you wouldn't start disrespecting that person to the people that loved them. I mean, if you had a family, or you're head of a family, or any number of things, you're in a position of leadership, and the previous person was a great leader, you would embrace that person. You would, talk about how great they were, and you would minimize yourself. You wouldn't try to compete with them. You wouldn't try to overshadow them. But anyways, Kamlesh went to this ashram, the Tuktaji ashram. Tuktaji passed away. He died. He's an Indian saint, more like a Gandhi. He was more like someone who was working for farmer rights, poor people rights. So he's more like a politician slash social reformer more than a spiritual person. And he was around when Babaji was around. He was around when Chariji was around. He could have found Babaji and been a part of the Sahaj Marg system, but he didn't, he wasn't spiritual in that way. He was more of a social reformer. And he has about 200,000 people in that region, mostly poor farmers, that really like the guy. That still recognize him as their master. So he has a following. And so some people in Heartfulness decide to try to glom onto these people and convert them all over to Heartfulness. And Daji went to the ashram and he gave a talk there. He gave a sitting, I'm sorry. And in the sitting, he said that Tuktaji merged in him. Now, we can't prove that didn't happen, but we all know that still it's kind of fishy, right? This guy Tuktaji. And Babaji announced it, and the Tuktaji people didn't believe him because it's goofy. He said it's a kind of a, he gets up from satsang and says, "Oh, Tuktaji just merged in me," which would mean that they should now follow him, right? That they should all convert. And, he's lied about these messages before with, most recently, he talked about how Babaji told him to cancel Chariji's birthday and Babaji's birthday and merge the two celebrations with his birthday and Lalaji's. That Lalaji and Babaji's birthday would be celebrated on Lalaji's birthday, and Chariji's birthday would be celebrated on Daji's birthday. It was just goofy. It didn't work. He got, it was just a number one of his. He fails all the time, right? But he said this, this thing that he said, and then he wrote this letter. Now, this letter, I guess, was posted on social media. Then people realized it was completely, really shitty, and that's like you got to get rid of it. So this is 19th of October, 2010. But there are people who saved it. The historical moment shall always be remembered by the members of both organizations. It's not. And the other problem with Tuktaji is his birthday is the same birthday as Babaji. And so they celebrate Babaji's, they celebrate their master's birthday when we celebrate Babaji's. And so they're not going to, are you going to celebrate Tuktaji's birthday on Babaji's birthday at Kana? Like, it's goofy. Like, he just does stupid shit like this, right? It says, Tuktaji, merger in my humble self at 4 p.m. satsang is the true turning point. So he's writing this. This is Daji. He signs it down here, Daji, right? So he's writing this to this thing that he says this guy's merged in him. And true turning point. This merger to this path of Sahaj Marg reminds me of the 1945 year when many systems found their future leader in the person of Puja Babaji. So he's saying, he's comparing to himself to Babaji here. That when 1945, when Babaji was asked to, again, this was right before the gathering that was supposed to take place. So he's comparing himself to Babaji, and that the people of Tuktaji will follow him now, right? And so, and he said, I am more than delighted to see Reverend Tuktaji becoming part of the hierarchy of masters, starting with Lord Krishna. So this is what Kamlesh says is the hierarchy of masters in Sahaj Marg, right? And now Heartfulness. Lord Krishna, Lalaji, Babaji, no Chariji, right? Lalaji, Babaji. He leaves out Chariji, Swami Vivekananda, Parahamsa, that's, this guy, Sri Ram Krishna. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. I'm not sure what this is here. Certainly isn't Chariji. Kabir Sahib, Buddhaji, Nayank Sahib, and now, dot. And so that would be his name right there. With lots of love and respect, Kamlesh. So he left Chariji off the list of people in the divine hierarchy. He said all these people, according to the Sahaj Marg teachings, there are 3 people have reached the central region: Babaji, Chariji, and Lalaji. That was the breakthrough. That when Lalaji broke through and discovered the yatra points and the central region, that was something that no one had ever accomplished, right? So that was a breakthrough. But he lives Charji, who we all, if Charji isn't in the central region, then Daji isn't. Like, Charji's clearly better. Like, he's by disparaging Charji, he's, the only credibility that Daji has, because he is goofy, stupid, he makes bad decisions. The only credibility he has is that Charji made him his successor, and that Babaji, through the whispers of the brighter world, endorsed him. And so that he is the legitimate successor of this mission, the legal successor. We all saw Charji's video where Charji endorses, where he says, that that Daji's my successor, Kamlesh is my successor. He announces him as his representative. And so if he throws Charji under the bus, he has no credibility, because his actions and his behaviors and his bad decisions, he's contaminated the system. So this was written by the Daji truther here. And he says, so Per Tuktaji was merged with Babaji on 19th October in satsang, becoming part of the hierarchy of masters: Lord Krishna, Lalaji, Babaji, Swami Vivekananda, Parahamsa, Sri Ramchandra, Chichaji, Maharaj Prabhu, Kabir Sahib, Buddhaji Nayak Sahib, and now Jaji. So where's Daji's master, Guru Chariji? Wasn't Chariji the master of the past, present, of the Sahaj Marg system, and one of the who appointed Daji? So he writes the same thing, right? I've been told there are people who are meditating on Chariji's form. They're upset by what's going on. And, there's this guy here. He's a preceptor. There's preceptors that are, people have reached out to me over the years and sent me information, and they're freaked out with the direction the mission is going, right? But the important thing to understand is, whatever you believe about Daji, whatever motivation you think he has for this, Chariji's literature has disappeared. Chariji is no longer, Chariji was everything when he was alive. Certainly he talked about Babaji and he glorified Babaji, and everything for Chariji was about Babaji. But people gravitated to Chariji, and he delivered with all this content, right? And now that content is disappearing. And it is going to be gone in the near future. Like I said, as soon as all the people who died, all the people who remember Chariji and met Chariji die, and that's the next 30 years or whatever, he'll be barely a memory, right? The Daji truthers pointed out to me that, Kana has a road called Swami Vivekananda Avenue or Road or something. They have that 40-foot statue of Babaji, but there's no Chariji, right? Chariji has, just doesn't have a place anymore. He's been, they're trying to wipe him away from, the Heartfulness people are trying to wipe him out of the hierarchy of the system, where even Daji leaves him out of the hierarchy of the system. Okay, so I've made hours and hours of videos about all the ways that Daji has separated himself, and in some cases completely reversed the Sahaj Marg teachings and the teachings of Chariji and Babaji. And so those videos have been copyrighted. The mission, the Heartfulness debacle, the Heartfulness cult has copyrighted those videos, so I can't show them to you. I have all these evidence of, whatever. This is what I do for a living. And it was very easy to find all the times that, the Brighter Minds scam, all these things, they're just goofy. Like, they're stupid on top of being, like, blasphemous and whatever. And that he's thrown Chariji under the bus. But either way, whether you want to believe that or not, they're not reprinting Chariji's works. Whatever you want to believe, it's not my problem. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you believe Daji's great or whatever. Whatever your reason for staying with Daji, and, that's your business and nothing to do with me. So this is about something completely different. But the evidence is overwhelming that the Heartfulness is not republishing Chariji's works. Lots of his works have disappeared completely. And so I've known about this problem. And maybe it's God's will that all of the literature disappear. Like, maybe Daji is somehow doing God's work, because there's going to be, that human beings in the future, and he's talked about, Babaji talked about this himself, in various places, and then, of course, the Whispers of the Brighter World messages. There's a prophecy of all these upheavals that's given in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages and all the messages that go along with that. But Babaji said in my vision in Reality at Dawn, which might be considered like the Bible, Sahaj Marg Reality at Dawn, at the end of the book, he talked about how there'd be a new paradigm, a new world that would be built on the bones and ashes of the previous world, right? And that no country, no nation would survive without spirituality as its base. And he's talked about that in more detail in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, where he said that people are going to have a genetic mutation. There's all this junk DNA, which they call junk DNA, hidden potential, right? Unrealized potential in every human being. And if you look at Babaji being an example of an evolved person, something that we could all evolve into later on, as there's this movement towards spiritual evolution. And Babaji's ability to intercommune and go directly to the source, let's say, there's all these supposed indigo children, all these people. So let's say that there's going to be a time where there's going to be no need for books because everyone's going to be able to connect so deeply to the source, a la Babaji, a la these masters, where they could get knowledge directly through their meditative process and no longer need books and external data, then fine. That Chariji, they can connect to Chariji directly. And so if his literature is lost, it's no tragedy. But that's a possibility. But until that time, Chariji's work has value. And just because Daji has some kind of, whatever's happened with Daji and his insecurities, his, trying to compete with Chariji, his dislike in Chariji, whatever it might be, and the Heartfulness organization, and they have the copyrights. They're the only ones who can reprint these books, right? They're the only ones who can do anything to, to make sure that this stuff is preserved. In fact, there was a time early on where Daji was printing everything in archival paper because of the predictions, the prophecies. There's an epic prophecy in the Whispers of the Brighter World that in 25 years from 2001, which is now, with 2025, 2026, the end of 2025, the beginning of 2026, if it was given in February 2020, February of 2001. So 25 years from them would be February of 2026, right? That there was going to be a big major upheaval. And then there would be a series of them. And then all the predictions and prophecies and work that Babaji did to rework the world and make it to where spirituality would become something that you had to embrace to survive. Like just because of the conditions on planet Earth and the depopulation of all maybe the negative or lower developed souls, so that there could be an upward movement, right? And so Daji started making books in archival paper so they could be preserved. And then he stopped. I don't know. He's done a lot of things where he starts something, he stops them, right? But so there's that. So anyways, the point of this video is that there is this work out there, and there are a lot of you who have, maybe you guys come across this video, a lot of people who are older Abhyasis, who are boomer hippies in America, and, Chariji people, maybe you knew Babaji a little bit, and you have a vast library of books. And you don't have kids who do Sahaj Marg. You don't have younger people. I mean, there's Abhyasis. The ones doing Heartfulness don't even know who Chariji is. They don't value it, right? And so we need to preserve this epic amount of work. As long as it's available, we should preserve it. If God wills it, if Babaji, this work is supposed to disappear, then yeah, that's, then we can't do anything to stop it. But until that time, it still has value to people. New people who don't have access to it only have crappy, dodgy books to read and things like this. And so, there's some of these videos that are up on various channels on YouTube, some of Chariji stuff, and there's some other things that are out there. But for the most part, Chariji stuff has disappeared. And so, like, if you don't have somebody to will these books to, the books could be destroyed. They might make it into bookstores somewhere or something like that. But you should make a plan. Like if you have kids and you're leaving a will, and you should advise them to do something with these books. And if you don't have a plan, send them to me, because I'll do my best to preserve these books. And so people can contact me through this channel and through Positive Future Gmail and things like this. But if you're an older Abiyasi, or you have access to these things, or your kids, like my preceptor Fred, I tried to contact his ex-wife, and I didn't know where to. I'm not sure where he is, even if he's even still alive. I tried to contact him, but there's people out there who have just wonderful wealth of knowledge and books and things. And some of these things once in a while appear on some kind of, they make it into some used bookstore, something on eBay or something. But for the most part, they are, they're going to disappear. And if there is some sort of, if these predictions come true, and the world is, disrupted in some way, and the current system is destroyed, then this literature will be destroyed with it. And if that's God's will, it's God's will, like I said. But if it isn't, then we should do our best to preserve these books. Have a plan. Come up with some way to pass these books on to somebody who values them, where people can get access to them in the future. Because, it may be a future life for yourself. You come back and you read one of Chariji's books, and all this, it's like a trigger for all this information from your previous existence, this life, and your abiyas is there, right? I mean, who knows the value of these works, but we've already experienced them. And so please do something about it, right? Like, just think about it. Be proactive about this. As you get older, people getting older, come up with some kind of, or, if you know older abiyasis, have a talk with them about this. Because, again, these books are going to disappear, and then Chariji's legacy will be gone. And if that, like I said, if that's God's will, it's God's will. But if it's not, then it would be a shame for us to not act and not do something to preserve this, this wonderful person's work, this work that affected all of us, his epic content that was transformative for so many of us. And why rob future generations of that content when we could do something about it? Anyways, just something to think about. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.